Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Johnny. Thanks all for being here. Many of you were out last week on the Give a Day weekend. Felt like more than a day, I think. In and around Sandylands, helping people who were just coming back into their homes or about to come back in their homes. And the day was sunny, and today isn't. And that sounds about right. We're inside today. We were outside last week. More about that in a moment, really. There isn't anybody here who's going to forget the 5th of December 2015. And I'm always, we talk about this in the last few months since it happened, quite reluctant, slightly embarrassed kind of talking about our experience as a family. Because let's be honest, it's nothing compared to what people put up with when they have lost their homes, and in many cases still out of their homes. People, businesses massively damaged, their incomes damaged, their lives turned upside down. If you talk to the local mental health team, they will tell you that the demand on mental health services has gone up by close to double in some circumstances, because these things have an impact on people's lives in a way much more than is physical and at the first glance obvious. But nevertheless, our experience as a family, which is much less than those experiences, was just to see the ferocity and the power of it all. It was another child's birthday weekend, and we were just depositing one of my kids' friends back at home, and taking the safe and high route back. But that took no account of the fact that the River Beela decided to break its banks at precisely the moment we drove past it. And when you see water coming up to your waist and still rising in the car, and when you've got 4 kids in the car, at least one of which is, somebody else's, and you've got extra special responsibility to them, haven't you? And you think, you've got to abandon the car, and your prefab sprout seedlings, and they can't be replaced. And then those kids who felt like it walked and waded, and those who didn't, I had to carry them. And you get out, and you realise what could have happened. And you realise the force and the speed, the pace with which this happened. I was only sketchily aware at that point as we sort of reached dry ground and began to walk towards the village of home. And somebody whose name I don't know, by the way, picked us up halfway. And it did us some good physically to not have to walk through an extra couple of miles of rain. But you know what? What it did most was it gave us a boost in here. The thought of somebody, the first volunteer, my first experience of a person giving up something they didn't need to give up, to be generous with their time and their resources in that long night that then followed, to be picked up by somebody and be given that sort of sense of human kindness was immensely inspirational. But as we then eventually got home, you don't need to know the details, but eventually got home, began to realise what was unfolding in Kendal. And so in a few short hours, I was amongst people whose experiences were far worse than those that we had experienced. You all know the facts that people reiterate regularly, that we have this short, fast river that starts up just beyond Kentmere and ends up not too far from our house in 16 short miles, and it moves like an express train. It takes things in its wake. And one of the reasons why, by the way, TV cameras tend to hang around in the likes of Carlisle rather than in Kendal is because our water moves quickly. It does immense damage. It doesn't hang around for days afterwards, but I tell you what, the devastation does. And to me, walking around Sandylands and Appleby Road and Shap Road and other parts of Kendal on the morning afterwards, on the Sunday morning, and seeing, as I think one of the people on the video commented upon, that heartbreaking sight of a bedraggled, bedecked Christmas tree lent against a lamppost, presumably some yards away from the house it originated from. The hope of an early Christmas. We don't allow our kids to put up the Christmas tree until after that weekend, but normally that's the case. This weekend there were people who had got their Christmas decorations up, they were looking forward to that period, and that juxtaposition of the excitement of a recently bedecked front room and decorated home to the devastation that went by was utterly heartbreaking. Knocking on someone's door who was the first to confess to me that for all sorts of utterly understandable reasons they were not insured. And it was more than just the immediate devastation, it was a sense of utter helplessness. What on earth do I do now? How do I feed my kids? Where do I go? Picking up all that as the day went by, and then seeing people who'd lost almost everything helping out people who'd lost absolutely everything. My recollection last week, just on the Give a Day event, where you had people who perhaps lived relatively quiet lives, not being by their own mission, people being terribly plugged into the community, had been helped by the teams of volunteers, by Johnny and by others, and their reaction to that was to roll their sleeves up and go and help somebody else as well. Hugely inspiring to see how community spirit is utterly infectious, and the desire to do to others what you would have done to yourself is something that you can learn from other people, and it makes you immensely proud, if I'm honest with you. And so the people who are involved in all this, and the reason why this event is so very, very important, it's not drawing a line under it. It's not saying that's the end of the event that began on that night on the 5th of December, but it is about saying a very, very clear and a massively heartfelt thank you. And you all know who you are. I mean, people like Johnny and Wendy at the church, that church absolutely was put there for such a time as this. You look at the people around, we saw Shirley Evans, the local councillors, who absolutely bust a gut throughout and still does, and everybody who works for the councils, district and town and county, people working for the emergency services who went beyond, above and beyond, not just that night and the following day, but every day since. People who were involved in the construction industry, landlords, housing associations, everybody who pulled the shift, the other churches, people involved who set up and ran Kendal Cares, all those people who did things they did not need to do over and above what they were paid to do, or indeed totally voluntary in the first place. That difference was immense. So yes, you made a physical and a practical difference to people in desperate need. Now just go back to how I felt when that guy stopped his pickup and got me and 4 bedraggled kids in it that night on Saturday the 5th of December. It wasn't so much the sense that I'd been physically assisted out of the rain. I couldn't have got any wetter anyway. It was the sense that somebody had done a kind thing. A kind thing. And a kind thing makes a massive difference to us in our relationship with the rest of the world and how we feel and our ability to go on. So the people we've spoken to, hundreds of people, I mean over 2,000 houses directly affected in Kendal. You go further north of here, you look at the impact of the Ambleside, Grasmere, devastated by that massive hole in the road for the best part of 6 months and what that meant. Throughout our community, there's been a huge and tangible loss, personally, family-wise, business-wise, in terms of the economy. And it's a little bit of a cliche to say that it has demonstrated all the same the best that we have in South Lakeland. And the response to that devastation has been to work together, to pull together as a community, to help one another, and to be determined not to be defeated. Those of you with long enough memories are looking around, there's quite a few. It's only 15 years since the Commonwealth disaster. That appalling crisis that hit our town and our county with almost apocalyptic sort of overtones to it. If you look back, horrific it was, but it was a moment when, for example, the tourism industry had a fresh look at itself and decided to use that awful opportunity as an opportunity to become and develop a new, fresh offer. And I'd argue that the evidence of the Lake District's strength over the last 15 years was as a consequence of the response to that disaster. When disaster comes a-knocking, you're not just going to bat it away, you've got to put it in its box by deciding to be better afterwards than you were before. And that is my sense of what is happening across South Lakeland, in Kendal especially, but across the whole of our community. So for me, it's heartbreaking and inspirational in equal measures to have seen the impact on the homes, the family lives, the disruption that was caused, businesses, the economic, personal impact that people felt, and inspirational to see the way in which people responded and how they helped one another. And I think that is what we have to take out of all this. There are all sorts of lessons to be learned, all sorts of practical things we need to do. I mean, one group I haven't thanked, and I should, the Environment Agency. They pull their sleeves up and work incredibly hard in those early hours to make a difference. There's not enough of them. But I remember having a conversation with someone, I won't embarrass them or possibly get them sacked by naming them. But you remember that there was a £4 million scheme that was meant to be built on the Kent, and it never got built. because it was deemed to be too expensive. I don't know how many homes that would have saved being built. I have no idea, honestly, off the top of my head. But I had a conversation with this unnamed person a few days afterwards, which was, it went like this. I said, look, this is the time, it might sound callous, but this is the time to ask for, to design, and to ask for the money for the most ambitious and effective overall holistic flood relief scheme that we could possibly dream of. This is the moment when we're more likely to get a yes. And so it was drawn up, and it cost £4 million, it cost £25 million, and they've said yes, and they've said yes. Now the point is, it's not built yet. We clap when it's built. And even when it's built, nobody can guarantee that an event such as that on the 5th of December can never happen again. But I don't know about you. For me, if I want to feel secure, to make me feel secure, I need to have some evidence to help me to feel secure. And you know that there's people in this room whose whole psychology changes, their whole sense of well-being changes the moment the rain gets a bit heavy. Kids who cannot sleep the moment the rain gets a bit heavy. What I'm told by people who've had schemes like this built before and elsewhere in the country is the simple knowledge that a scheme has been built to make that less likely makes a massive psychological difference to your ability to sleep, to cope, to get on. This has been a disastrous thing. I cannot promise you it will never happen again, but I can promise you that we between us can do everything we can to make it less likely. And so thank you. Thank you to everybody here. And I know you are representative of all those who pulled the shift and worked their socks off, not just that night, but ever since, of those people who were victims themselves and yet came out and were volunteers and made a lasting difference to their community. You're representative of them, but by golly, you're probably a small fraction. Well, you are a small fraction of all those who did those things, of whom I am immensely, immensely proud. So I don't think that the floods of the 5th of December changed our community and made us a strong community. It was a devastating opportunity to demonstrate something that was already the case. And that is that this is a part of the world with a real understanding of what community really means. That it means serving one another. It means whatever's happened to you, thinking of someone else who may be in a worse circumstance. And all of that, the fact this has played out, we very often comment and criticise sometimes the media when they come and they film these things and they give an account of what's going on and then they go away. I just want to say that to our local media, and I mean Lakeland Radio, Westland Gazette, Radio Cumbria, and local television, without you highlighting the need, an awful lot of people who responded would not have known how to respond. So I am very grateful to all of you, every single one of you here, and all those who worked so hard. I said this before now, but I think the floods bring it to mind all the more as I see how you have all responded. If you forgive me for saying this, and I look at some of the things in the news from time to time, I will confess to you, there are moments when I'm not all that proud to be a Member of Parliament. However, I am always proud to be your Member of Parliament. Thank you.